was my calf muscle, which was bad, but it took.
Yeah.
All righty.
We're it.
I'm going to call to order the July 20th, 2021 Planning Commission meeting. Call the roll, please.
Mayor Safarian,
Here.
Mr. Olive,
Here.
Mr. Vrieslar,
Not here.
Mr. Orovitz,
He's not here.
Chairman Winkowski.
Here. As everyone can see who are the applicants, there are only 3 of us here today. You need 3 affirmative votes to have your measure passed. If you are not going to get those 3 votes, we will tell you and let you know that, so that if you want to come back next month with a full panel, you will have that option. So, floor is open for a motion to approve the June 15th minutes.
So moved.
I will second.
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none opposed, the June 15th, 2021 regular meeting minutes are hereby approved. The first matter before the board is SUE 157-18, extension of a special use in an R2 medium-density residential zone district to operate a restaurant tavern, previously approved by council with conditions on January 14th, 2019. The applicant owner is BJ Lawson, BJ's Hideaway Steakhouse LLC. The location is 506 South Wallendorf Road. Mr. Gilmore.
Yes, I think the only thing I really can add to that is that the 4 conditions were that it would be operated as a restaurant as opposed to a bar. They'll serve only until 10 p.m. The parking lot will be secured with curb stops, and the waste receptacle will be located to the rear of the property. So those were the 4 conditions.
And are we changing anything from what we had done, or are we just asking for an extension here?
We're asking for extension. As you know, it may have been tough to open a restaurant during the last year. So it put them over the 2-year limit. So we thought it would be prudent to bring them back here for an extension and to move forward with it then.
Mr. Chairman,
Mayor Safarian.
the state did grant us latitude to extend things like this, but we thought as a formality, we would come in anyways to take any question out. But it is possible that if we just let it go, this would still, they could make a case that it would exist as a standing SUE.
Is Mr. Lawson here? Mr. Lawson, would you approach and identify yourself, and if we have any questions?
Okay, BJ Lawson, 1324 South Stadium Road, Oregon. And what it was, a virus came in, so we sort of closed it down. almost ready to open up before. And the virus come, and so we just closed it down because once you get a name of virus being in there, it hurts in the long run. So we're almost ready. We're not too far away right now. We're waiting for the sanitizers from Oregon, from Gordon Foods. They're installing everything. The architect is Strozine. He likes a few more things to do in there because we changed a lot of the equipment around and bought new equipment out there. So all that, it just taking a little bit more time than what it should have. We should have, been sooner, but we couldn't get everything was on delay. We couldn't rush anything out.
And it's my understanding that you're just trying to continue this and we're still gonna
Right.
have the same
It's
four,
the same.
the same
continue.
four restrictions that we put on it from the
Right,
last
we're
time.
still, I've abided by all the restrictions, the curb stops in the back, the sanitary things, everything.
I would think the neighbors are most concerned about the 10 PM.
But well, I'm still gonna have the 10 PM. I have a 2:30 liquor license though, but I'll stay with the 10.
Okay.
o'clock.
Well, that's a
I wanna
requirement,
get out
that's a
there anyway.
requirement that
Yeah.
that we had on it before, and
Right.
I'm anticipating that we're gonna stay with that
Sure.
10 o'clock matter
But I have,
when you
a
leave
like I
here
said, I
today.
got a 2:30 liquor license granted by the state, but I'm still only gonna stay open to 10 o'clock, period. I'm not gonna.
Okay.
I'm getting old anyway, so I don't want to stay open.
I don't have any questions. Panel?
None.
Okay, thank you. Anyone that else wish to speak? Either for or against this matter?
Well, my name is Robin Burnett. And it's not so much that I'm against the restaurant opening up. He still has some things that he hasn't done yet. He's supposed to put a fence along the back line to keep from driving on the property. We've had cars that drove on your property, that drive on her property. No, on the previous restaurant.
Okay.
Not, I mean, not the, when you were previously
Sure,
open,
okay.
you haven't been open, so they haven't
Okay.
had it. They had it in the past.
Sorry.
The other thing that I have in regards to is that previously we were here for a meeting in regards to him putting a patio out front and serving food and liquor outside, and it's residential areas, right? It's in our homes. And it was voted down, or however. And so he went ahead and built a patio on the outside of it anyways, on the side. Now, I'd like to know what the purpose of that is, because he's not supposed to be serving food and drinks outside. That is my other question that I have.
That one's over my head, so I'll ask Mr. Gilmore or Mr. Lawson what's happening with that, because one, was never at a meeting where that was discussed. And two,
Every place has a little small head. It only seats about 10, 15 people. It's like, it's not, I don't see where it hurt anybody.
Well, what is your purpose for having the patio?
Because people sit and relax before they go in the house.
So it's only for waiting?
Well, it's gonna be.
You're serving- are you serving food and drink?
Outside, you do it every other place, you don't just have one place. I mean, every place.
I know, but it-
outside patio.
We have
This is-
sufficient
We have
check, you know.
restrictions in this
You
neighborhood.
got a chance to get
You've
outside.
never had this outside. We've never had an
Okay.
issue with people drinking and eating
I
outside.
think it won't be-
Never. Never had this. And all of a sudden, it's something that's being brought to the table.
okay, well, I'm asking that question of Mr. Gilmore now, because I don't recall that issue ever coming up before. And
But we had a meeting that he was
Well,
denied access to
that-
build a patio.
You're right.
And he went ahead and did it on the side
Well-
of his house. on
well,
the building.
Well, first of all, there was a meeting when he was in business to expand his legal non-conforming business to extend outside to a patio. It was turned down at that time at the plan
is
commission.
that us?
Yes.
Or the board of review.
It was in front
Or
of the
the,
building, though, not at the side of it.
Jim, was
No,
it a
let
variance?
us figure this out, because I do not recall ever having that. I've been on the plan commission for 15 years.
Well,
I don't ever remember
you
an
know,
outdoor
I'm
patio
trying to
issue come
remember,
up.
okay? But I think it went to the Board of Zoning Appeal.
It did go to.
Yeah, I think it was B, yeah, B.
It went to the board-
Okay.
It went to the Board of Zoning Appeal where it was turned down,
Okay.
okay?
Well, we came here for a meeting.
You probably
That's
did.
fine.
Right,
You
right.
probably
It'll
did.
be the same
Right.
room.
It's here
It'll
too.
be the same place.
Oh,
Same room, different group.
So I just have to say, if, this is a special use, it could be added or not at this meeting.
Well, I think it would be probably useful on our part to at least address it and put some,
Or Jim, does this?
put some parameters within what we're going to
Yes.
do. Obviously, if he's going to have a waiting area out front, that's one thing. If he's going to be serving dinner, that's another matter. If he's going to be serving sir, let me finish. If he's going to be serving dinner out on the patio, that's one matter. If he's going to be serving alcohol and drinks and having wait staff out there, that's another matter. And so I would rather clarify that today as to what he can and can't do so that Mr. Gilmore's office doesn't have to go and either cite him and then we're all back here 6 months from now. So, yes, I agree with you. We do need to address what is going to happen out there. Personally, I don't have a problem with a wait.
I
I
don't have a
don't-
problem with people sitting there, but I do have a problem with people drinking and eating because it is a very quiet residential.
I do as well, because of the special location of that property. No question. I'm looking at you two only because
Yeah, Mr.
you
Chairman,
guys are the other votes.
I don't recall anything about a fence. Where did this fence come?
No,
There was no-
it was
It was just-
discussed. It was discussed as I can recall, but we ended up with the curb stops.
The curb stops is
Yes.
all we came up
Right.
with, yeah.
And that's documented.
Well,
I
was gonna say the ordinance spells it out.
We were okay with the curb stops because it's so overgrown for the deer with the park, that we have, so. The park, the deer come in, so the curb stops, there's, now if they go over into our property, they're gonna be in basically a park. So, we already have a natural barrier for that house.
I think the resolution, from my recall, the resolution of either a fence or curb stops was curb stops.
Right, the fence came in that other neighbors whose fence was damaged.
Yes.
Prior that, BJ said that he would fix that damage from where prior customers had run into the fence.
Yep.
Yes. We agree
Correct.
with our property, as we own our neighbor's property with the fence. They were weeding, they cleared it today.
Okay.
They cleared it out today.
Well, the curb stops are there, so the curb stops hopefully will stop any of that happening.
Thank you.
Ma'am, if you're going to address the board, please identify yourself.
This thing about this patio.
Oh,
last
name
time
and
I was-
address, please.
Phyllis Adam, right here.
Okay.
That thing about that patio thing, we already voted, we didn't want it. Why are we doing it again?
Well, I didn't vote that I did or didn't want it.
Oh, well, the neighbors didn't want that, and we voted against.
Well, there's a lot of things that happen in this town that the neighbors don't want, and sometimes it doesn't go their way. So there's a lot of things that the neighbors do want that does go their way.
His
So I'm not saying
idea-
one way or the other.
His idea of a drunk not running into that lady's property. I noticed she planted trees back there because he wouldn't do anything about it.
Scott, when we had that meeting on the patio out front, we had taken up petitions, we had almost 200 names that we to have brought it in when we had that meeting. And it was voted down, they had a patio, eat outside and drink outside.
Well, that's different than what I imagine should be going on there as well.
Only like a 10-foot section going back to the law. But
Okay. Any comments from the panel? Mayor? Mr. Olive?
The problem line, we issued permits for the den for EW3s for about every other unit out there. It's gonna be a difficult thing to deny.
Well, that's not an issue before us right now.
Yeah, so.
You know, so
Yeah,
I'm not saying we can escape it, but clearly I think that that's, are we the board to address that?
Me-
Why did it go to Board of Zoning Appeals the first time?
Well, it was a different circumstance. It was, at the time, it was a non-conforming use, okay? So they wanted to increase their non-conforming use to include outside seating. So that goes to the board. Since then, they were out of business 2 years. They lose their non-conforming use. They come back to you for a special use now because they lost the opportunity to fall under the non-conforming use because it was closed down for 2 years. You granted them the special use with those 4 conditions and with no mention of outdoor seating at that time.
Yeah.
So you could move forward stating that the original, since this is an extension of the original and the 4 conditions, that you don't want to add it to the, or you can add it if you wanted to, you know. This goes to city council after this too.
Mr. Roman?
I just want to echo the same thing. I mean, you're really working off this ordinance 9 of 2019 as to whether you continue it or you add or remove a condition that was a part of it originally.
Agree. Anyone
Did-
else,
did
anyone
I-
else wish to speak?
One more thing though.
Okay.
But I think that under the original agreement, there was no outside seating.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Mayor?
if we get back to a non-conforming use, officially, there was no use granted there. It was, we treated it as a non-conforming use because nothing was ever applied for because it was grandfathered in from the beginning of times before the city was a city. So it was it was a pre-existing structure, which led us to believe that they could still exist without non-conforming use, without an SUE, without pretty much anything.
A non-conforming use is simply this, is that they were in business before the ordinance was written.
Correct.
And I think we all can agree that
yeah.
this was in business before the
Exactly.
ordinance was written. So it was considered a non-conforming use, okay?
But
And-
what I'm getting at is when we did some legal checking, when a grandfathered clause that came in as operating as a restaurant before the beginning of times doesn't necessarily hold to the standard of if it shuts down for 2 years, it doesn't exist. That's where the question came up, where they could reopen as the non-conforming use because it always was. So we found we could not defend that position to deny the non-conforming use. There was no expiration on it. So Paul Roman's correct when we are now issuing a SUE, it falls under this body versus the Board of Zoning Appeals. So that would be, I
Sir,
would,
I'm sorry, I
That's fine.
forgot that you were there for a second.
Yeah. Mark Wineland, 430 South Wallen. I'm just trying to learn on how this whole process works, and I'm still confused. Because now we're saying that since the place was there before it was a city, they're granted that non-conforming use to operate in a residential area.
That's correct. Well, that's sort of correct, if I could continue. with it.
Absolutely.
All right,
Mayor.
all right. If a business exists before the beginning of times as a city, they are permitted to exist. We then call that a non-conforming use. And we have some parameters on non-conforming uses that other buildings were non-conforming use and people then moved into it. That has some status of what parameters we can put on, like if they shut down, then that we could then after 2 years, they would lose that non-conforming use. Others that started at that before the time, there's legal decisions that say they keep that they don't expire. But now that we have treated it as an SUE, and if there are going to be additions that fall above and beyond what we originally granted, it would have to come through this body versus going to the Board of Zoning Appeals. That looks very similar to this. It sits in the same seats and whatnot, but it just handles different cases. So it would be, depending on how we treat it, once it becomes a SUE, it have the jurisdiction falls with this body and then city council, versus if it was a non-conforming use, it would be treated then for addition or for variations to it by the Board of Zoning Appeals.
So if it had the SUE, that stays in place whether it's open or not open. In other words, we're here 2 years later.
Well,
for to do,
the SUE does have the expiration after 2 years. If it doesn't operate under that use, it loses that zoning. But in most cases, the state allowed latitude during these type of situations because the COVID shut businesses down. And they said they weren't going to use that margin to shut a zoning change down. We were doing it for clarification. Whether we had to do it, it's probably, you could make a case either way. We would have a hard time taking that SUE away. But for clarification purposes, we were going on record to say, yes, it is a existing SUE, and we're confirming that. Is that what we were doing today?
okay, so then with the history of the restaurant there, there was no residential from the one neighbor who used to own it, I think.
Yeah.
All the way down to Navarre. And now that whole block is residential. So there has been a change to that neighborhood. And
Under the grandfather clause, that would be irrelevant.
But I'm reading in the boarding, the Board of Zoning rules or what have you, that if there is a change in the neighborhood, that they may not be granted.
Depends on how it falls into the zoning from original.
Right.
If that could change if it were granted
And
during the tenure of being incorporated as a city.
okay, and the restaurant has been closed for how many years?
Well, the re-app for the SUE, or the application for the SUE, was granted almost 2.5, 3 years ago. 2019, all right. All right.
That was
So
council.
2.5 years ago, 2.5 years ago. Oh, 20,
Four
Been
total.
closed for years.
oh, yeah, but it closed for it, but but when we issued the SUE was about 2.5 years ago.
Right,
Yeah,
because the 2 years had expired again, so.
Right,
Yeah,
but what I'm,
back-
what I'm
yes.
saying, Mark, is that
Right. Yeah.
we weren't held to
Right.
that standard of the 2 years
Mhm.
by a state bound, by the Ohio Revised Code and the rules and regulations, they weren't enforcing that on these situations.
Right, and trying to follow this, you know, and it was my own impression that when the SUE was granted the 2.5 years ago, that restaurant was to be open within months.
And I
It
think
was,
that,
it was insinuated to be
Yeah,
open within months.
that's fair. That's,
Right.
I don't think anybody's arguing
And
that.
granted, we had a year of the COVID, but it could have been open a year before COVID hit, and it was not.
Once again, that becomes irrelevant once
Right,
it was
right.
working within the 2-year parameter when it did hit.
Okay, and then, just one other note or question.
The bottom line is we can't shut the restaurant down. Whether we can grant the outside patio is probably the only thing that is of any relevance here today.
Okay, then I must have been misunderstanding that if the variance was not given the 2.5 years ago, or if council did not approve it, being that the zoning board approved it, he could go back to court and say, hey, we're gonna open with no restrictions, and this is the way we're gonna do it.
He could make a case that he would be still grandfathered in. That doesn't give him the right to do outside sales.
Yeah.
He'd have to go then, if he made that case, he would then have to go through the Board of Zoning Appeals to ask for the patio versus this board.
Okay, and two more things. When the sign is put out in front of the property, what's the direction on how that sign is to be placed? I mean, I received a letter and I drove by that restaurant, maybe because I don't look all the time. And it was a week or so later, oh by golly, there's a sign out there. The sign is placed parallel to the road. So if anybody else had an interest that wasn't a close neighbor, that did not receive a letter, they may or may not have known that this issue was coming up again. So is there a direction to place the sign in parallel to the road, or could it be?
You mean the sign that the inspection department put in
Yes.
notifying of the.
Yeah.
Oh, inspection. I don't think we're splitting hairs there now, but.
No, I
Well,
just,
which
it's,
way?
I think it's a valid.
We try to
Let
identify.
Let Mr. Gilmore address that. since
Well,
it's from his
I
department.
don't believe that it states if it can be parallel or perpendicular to the road. A lot of times, we put it in so it won't blow away, okay? So, we get it up there the best we can. And I don't believe the code, I'll have to read it. I can't tell you for sure, but I don't believe the code gives a direction of design.
Okay, so I'm asking, could there be a direction that it would be?
So you want to change the code then?
No, not the code, just to the person placing the sign.
Just a policy. If,
Right.
yeah, we don't have a problem
Yeah,
popping a sign.
I'll try to
Like I said,
put
I
it
think we're
parallel
splitting
or
hairs.
perpendicular to the road.
Yeah, and then, last comment is that I'm opposed to extending the variance. Thank you.
Extending the,
SUE.
Sir?
I'm Bill Wilson. I'm a neighbor there on Wallendorf. And I think the issue here is we have a patio now that wasn't there before. And the board turned down the patio last time I was here. patio. What are we gonna do about it? Isn't there a zoning that says you need a permit to build structure on special use? Where do we go from here?
Mr. Lawson, please allow him to speak.
Do we need a permit?
Could I answer that?
Patio.
Mr. Gilmore.
For surfaces outside the restaurant, if it was a structure, for instance,
There's structure there.
a raised deck,
There's
a raised deck,
There's just not a floor, it's structure.
a raised deck, we would require a permit. But if it's a slab or stones on grade, we would not. Now, the real question is how you use that. Whether you sit out there while you're going to be seated, or again, if you're going to serve drinks out there, or if you're going to serve food out there, there's probably 3 different ways you can use that solid surface. And I think that's the question. I don't believe my department would get a permit for a slab on grade or stone.
Is it not an extension of the structure?
Again, it's the use we're concerned about, okay? The use of that outdoor space is the real question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gladios, you're the only ones left. You got something to say?
I would just like clarification, please.
Identify, please.
Christine Gladio, 512 South Wallendorf. This liquor license scares me, so I just want, because the angst that the neighbors feel is not with BJ, it's with the prior owner and all the partying and every craziness that you can imagine that happened. And that's why we asked for the 10 PM restriction. Now, the state has given him authority to sell liquor until 2:30. So can the city restrict the state's liquor license?
Mr. Chairman,
Mayor.
the parameters put on by this body and city council take precedent over that liquor license. One is a subset of the other. So just because he has a liquor license that allows alcohol sales to 2:30, if the SUE has a condition that says, and I'm guessing he serves till 10, doesn't mean that 10 o'clock everybody's out of there. He shuts the kitchen at 10. So you're probably assuming by 11 people are out of
No,
the,
we said 10. He shuts down by 9, everybody's gone by 10.
It says they will not serve past.
serve past 10. All right, or serve past 10. So somebody served, you can't say you got 2 minutes to eat, but whatever.
Can they
All right.
stay there till 2:30? That, the understanding from the neighbors was that, and it had been, DJ operated like that, the Ritz operated that, everyone was out of there by 10 o'clock. It
Mhm.
wasn't until game
Right.
time that it changed the use of the property.
A lot
to
of things
sports
changed
bar.
there. That's what.
Right, so I think if we could get some clarification from all of you that it's operation till 10, we were probably, BJ's one of his best customers. We ate there many times. We would love to be able to walk and have a nice dinner and a cocktail and then go home. But what we don't want is the chaos that came with game time, all the police activity that was there as well.
Well,
Not with
No,
you, with
no.
game time,
Well,
not with you.
Well, we can't tell a business that you have to make all your customers leave. We can't tell a homeowner that you have to make everybody leave.
Right, so.
Do I come to your house and say, it's 10 o'clock, Gladio's party's over,
we-
they gotta go home?
We've tried with you.
Well, I understand that. I understand that, but we can't do that.
Right.
I mean, that's kind of what you're
But
asking
you're
us to
saying
do.
sales,
Sales.
Sales.
The original thing said
sales,
sales end at 10 o'clock.
okay.
Right, serve,
Will not
serve,
serve.
will not serve past 10.
Right.
Okay.
will not serve
So
past 10
that we
o'clock.
have that clarification.
Yes.
And that, there's no question. At a minimum tonight, when we walk out of here, at a minimum, we're going to renew what we renewed 2 years ago.
That's correct.
And then.
Okay, and that's going to have the 4 conditions on.
Well, now you're gonna have to add the condition with the patio, but
Well,
that's.
I don't know.
If
we're
we-
gonna- I
it's
don't
already
know-
there.
I
It's
don't
already
know
out
if we're gonna do that
Yeah.
specifically, but at a minimum, we're gonna allow him to go forward with what he had before with the 4 conditions.
And Mr. Gilmore, you, I think, validated for all of us that this is until a new owner, that these restrictions would go with a new owner. So when BJ wants to get out of crazy ownership of being a business owner.
I looked at.
Yeah, the zone.
I looked at what my response to you was 2.5 years ago, and I said, this order runs with the land. It has nothing to do with owners. It runs with the land.
Okay.
So the new owner comes in, they have to live by those 4 conditions. A new owner comes in, the second new owner comes in, the third new owner comes in. They all have to live with those 4 conditions unless we change it.
Or unless, or unless they expire the 2-year time.
And then the last, just from a grandfather, from my understanding from living there 27 years, the restriction on that property was that it could not expand. It was given grandfather that, and that is why building that patio to expand that business was originally declined, plus the road there, I think, was a restriction.
I don't know,
And-
and that wasn't
And,
us.
and I can, that is correct, but when you apply for a special use, it's like it has its own zoning just with the special use, with the conditions that the plan commission puts on it and then voted finally by city council. So it's different than it was when it was a non-conforming use. Okay.
Okay.
Okay,
Just a
because he
different
lost
body
that.
ruling on it.
He lost, yeah, he lost that status, and that's why he has a special use.
Okay.
Okay? Does that make sense?
I believe so.
Okay.
Are you in objection to a patio?
I don't. You know,
This is,
it's an ownership issue.
yeah,
If this was a different owner at a different time, we would be objecting.
Hmm.
COVID has also provided a lot more outdoor need of space. So things have changed. We are business owners and we want to support entrepreneurs. And we abide by every single thing, regulation you guys throw at us, and we just expect he do so as well.
in a perfect world, that's what we all hope to. What I'm contemplating is when we granted a type of outdoor serving deal for most every other place, when they were reasonable requests, it kind of makes it hard to deny that we could actually try this patio in a trial basis as a temporary condition and see how it goes for the first year and has to come in for a renewal. If it works, if it doesn't, we can do away with it.
I believe you typically used it for smokers, right? They would go out and smoke and sit. He had a little butt thing.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
yeah, well, let's not, I mean, we were trying to work with everybody.
yeah.
And we're trying to be fair. And if it,
have
And
a
I think the
buffer.
thing is-
So I have a buffer for that patio. There's a house there and then Robin's house, they hear more. We have a buffer,
Robin's.
so.
She's on the other side from you guys.
Yeah,
right?
but you can, I think she gets more exposure. We have at least a house in between us. So,
if we granted a deal for a temporary permit for that, by the time it gets open, we have many months of when they're gonna use an outdoor patio and
and takes away parking.
and see how it works, and if it does create a neighborhood problem, we would curtail it.
That's why you guys are sitting behind there.
Yeah, it's always fun. And
Chairman.
Mr. Gomer,
if you're contemplating the patio, one item that's always a big deal is music. So you might want to put a restriction on music.
That we can do. Well, wait a minute.
Mr. Lawson?
Wait a minute.
Hold
Let him run the meeting.
Mr. Lawson, you can come up and have the floor.
Liquor control has already advised me I should have more people outside to eat because it would help the COVID stuff. And they want us all going inside, but yet there's nothing, I won't allow any noise or anything on that patio. I'm just that type of person. If they do, they're gonna have to leave. And I never had a problem with none of the people over there getting rowdy because the rowdy people don't come there. The people like yourself.
Well,
And be-
they don't for you. And
Yeah.
we're all worried about the next guy.
Yeah.
Right, true.
So we gotta look into the future of the whole dynamics of it.
But 10 o'clock is, I closed it down last time.
Absolutely.
And it was 11 before they got out there, but I never did have it no more than 10 o'clock.
And there's a lot of us that want you to open. And I think your neighbors, a lot of your neighbors do as well. And those of us that live in the general area are looking forward to being back there again. So we're trying to work with everybody. That's the one thing we always try to do. Ma'am?
I'm Phyllis Otto.
Mhm.
Another thing that, the last committee that was before, they promised that, they would have the building inspection over there and make sure that he had more than one bathroom. Is there another bathroom in there?
There's 2 bathrooms in there. I laid it in the bedroom.
Huh?
There's 2 bathrooms in there.
You had 2 bathrooms?
Yeah, ladies and men.
There always was.
There was just one bathroom.
There's 2 bathrooms.
There is.
I've been in there 100 times. There's always been multiple. There's
Yeah.
always been.
You probably didn't notice what it is. The ladies is the first one you went, and the men's the second one. You probably just didn't think about it. There's 2 bathrooms.
That was part of the kitchen. I worked there.
Not part of the kitchen. it's in the
Yeah,
back.
yeah, that's where the kitchen was.
Well, it might have been at one time, but it's not now. I'm just saying.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Floor is open for a motion to close the public hearing.
Make a motion to close the public hearing without objection.
Second,
Second.
all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none opposed, the public hearing is closed.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Olive?
I have no problem with renewing his SUE. I do have a little bit of a problem, us overriding the zoning appeals decision. I'm not comfortable. They studied it and had more arguments than we have. So I'm not comfortable with overriding their decision.
That goes in line with my position too, and I think what we owe it to both the neighbors and Mr. Lawson, that if we're going to have that hearing on the outside sales or the outside patio, other than I'm not sure anybody has a problem with, we're gonna see you in 10 minutes, go wait outside. As long as we're not selling, as long as they're not sitting, as long as they're not, getting their thing.
They can go out.
That's how it sits right now. That's how it sits right now. I think we owe it to the BZA and the other 2 panel members that are not here today, the neighbors and Mr. Lawson, that I agree. We pass what we had passed before. And if Mr. Lawson is gonna have outside sales, whether it be on a patio or in the parking lot or wherever, he needs to make arrangements through Mr. Gilmore's office to have us hear that. Would it be plan commission at that point?
Yes.
It would be the plan commission because it's its own zoning. Okay,
Okay.
you're creating its own rules for this particular use.
That would be my personal opinion as well.
Being that, Mr. Chairman,
Mayor?
being that you said that, and talking to Mr. Lawson before the meeting, said he believed it would be a month or two to open. If he wished to apply, we may want to reopen the public hearing, extend it to next meeting where we take up that issue of the outdoor sales. That way, we don't have another application and another permit. And it still addresses the problem because I believe that would happen. So, if that's you have.
Can we do that? Can we
Sure.
approve the one and leave open?
No. What we can do is reopen the public hearing that we close.
Okay.
Because we have to act. Once the public hearing is closed, we have to act between 30 and 45 days.
Gotcha.
But if the public hearing is not closed, the city council has to hear for that. If it's not closed, then our clock does not start running. So if you don't have a problem waiting for a decision for the next planning commission,
What do you mean by outside sales? You mean to say if a person walked in and bought it and they said, well, let's go outside and get a breath of air?
yes, anything goes. That you would
They can do
not,
that?
you would not be able to do that unless you are granted that right.
The only thing about it, liquor control told us to have more.
Doesn't matter.
outside, but I
It
don't know.
just doesn't matter. They give you the ability to sell liquor. They don't give you the ability to where you sell it. It just on the location or how you sell it, then the governing body becomes the city of Oregon. So I understand they may give you suggestions and they're familiar with a lot of people getting those abilities to sell outside. So I'm trying to come up with something that addresses that if you have a time parameters where by next,
We should be open within a month. According to the way, right now, we're waiting on Strohsign to come up with the.
Yeah.
Gordon Foods is looking on
I'm not concerned with all that. I said, do you have a problem with this process, decision coming from this body to come from next month's meeting instead of today's meeting?
What do you mean, the outside? I mean,
Well, the whole thing would be determined then.
So today it won't have to be bags and nothing, but sort of liquor inside, is what you're saying?
If you want it passed today, which it is gonna pass, I can tell you that. If you want it passed today, we would not include the outside sales. You would have to reapply. This was a way of doing it without reapplying. So what do you want to do?
Well, I want to pass it, because I want to get on with that.
All right.
Getting it
Okay.
over.
Good.
That's fine.
I ain't worried about that.
Mr. Roman, you had a
That's it.
comment. Mr. Roman, you had a comment.
I was just going to comment that the real debate is, do you deal with the patio in this ordinance or not? And then if you don't, you just remember that that patio is just a concrete slab outside.
Well, yeah, but.
I'm just saying you're,
See,
if-
we had a big waiting already to go in.
Well, they can sit out there. We can't stop them from sitting there. We can stop them from consuming anything out there.
and Mayor and Mr. Chairman, again, and then if there's any lawyers in the room, if you're serving, if I buy a beer at the bar and I take the beer outside, is that still serving outside? Because I bought it inside, but I'm taking it outside now to wait. Is that serving?
Matters what side you're representing.
That's not serving outside.
I mean, it's different if I send a waitress outside to take orders and then
Right.
she takes it out there to them. It's different than me buying it at the bar and taking it out myself to wait for my seat. What's the difference? I mean, there'd have to be a difference. You're not serving.
Have to read that.
I'm just saying that if it was me, that's what I'd be asking.
Yeah, all right. Well, we can ask all that, but if he wants the outside sales, he's got to reapply.
Correct.
We're ready.
Right,
Correct.
correct.
Public hearing's closed.
I need a
Put this to
motion.
rest. Move to approve SUE 157 of 18.
With the existing conditions.
Oh, yeah, as presented.
Second.
Roll, please.
Mayor Safarian.
Yes.
Mr. Olive.
Yes.
Chairman Winkowski.
Yes. So you can open The issue's still hanging out there regarding the outside sales / patio. You can open, you got exactly what you had before with the 4 conditions.
In the 30 to 45 days, the when city council rules on it, but
Well, like, well, like
That's
Mr.
never happened.
Like Mr. Roman just said, maybe you want to talk to a lawyer.
Yes.
yeah, go open it up.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. Your input was definitely necessary, so. And we weren't aware of, I was not aware of the previous outdoor stuff, so I'm glad you brought it up. Thanks, Robin. The next matter before us is ST 1545-21, split transfer for a variance on width to depth ratio in an R1 low-density residential zone district on the property described as parcel number 44-26841. The location is 4701 Pickle Road. The owner applicant is Janet Morrison. Mr. Gilmore.
Alex, do you have a slide of what show right there? They're adding the top part, they're splitting it off to parcel next door and adding it on to this parcel here. We were here before for actually the same thing with the depth. On a previous split, it was granted, and now he wants to add more to the back of his property. Okay, so the condition will be that it'll be split off the next door neighbor, and it'll have to be joined to his property.
And this is right behind the driving range, or this is what used to be the driving range?
Ball
right?
works, right?
Ball works.
Yeah, yeah.
Right next to the drive-in. Up to the Ball Works property, this, I think.
The mulch pile.
Mhm.
Mr. Murphy, if you want to address the panel, you're more than welcome.
Yes, please. Hi, I'm Kent Murphy. I am,
Hold on a second. Happy birthday, by the way.
my address is 200 Dixie Highway. That's where my business is. I'm an attorney with Eben Murphy and Lewandowski. I do a lot of work for Mr. Morrison and in this case, Janet Morrison, as well as Maumee Bay Turf. So as Mr. Gilmore indicated, in terms of the variance, as I understand it, we were before this body on the one that is just south of the lot in question. So that variance was granted. This will just be contiguous with that. So I was always taught in law school to know when to shut up and answer questions. So if anybody has any questions, I'm more than happy to answer if I can.
What's the distance from the VAR to what is now the back of this property?
I don't know. I would believe that a lot of it's like 330 feet.
It's
is the
not
magic
halfway.
number.
You understand what I'm asking? The new back of the, because I'm always an advocate of the 2020 plan, which is now 2021. And we had talked about the first 1,200 square feet or the first 1,200 feet off of Navarre was going to be all commercial.
Mhm.
And so,
Yeah,
I
I get it.
does this fall in line with that?
Well, first of all, we're not here for a zoning change.
I understand that,
It's fair.
but that's just a question that I have.
I would say if you look at the map, Scott,
Yep.
you know, it's not to that halfway point between Pickle and Navarre. You have properties off to the west that have the same depth off of Pickle or more of a
Okay.
depth, you know, so I get your concern.
Yeah.
But because of those other properties, I don't know if it would be the same.
Because we have kind of always reserved the first 1,200 feet on Navarre for
Right.
commercial.
Right, I get
At
what you're
least
saying.
that was what the 2020 plan said.
And unless I'm, were you finished, Mr. Nolan?
Yep.
Unless I'm misunderstanding the drawing that was submitted with the application, it does look like it's 1,200
Okay.
feet to me. That's,
Okay.
I'm not an engineer,
I
but that's
misspoke.
what it looks like to me.
Understand.
So,
Because how many feet is each half mile, how many feet is a half mile? Because that's a half mile from Pickle to Navarre.
I don't know if that's a, is that
25.
a half or a mile?
2,600.
Yeah, 26, so
That's
52.
Yeah,
40.
yeah.
40.
2,600, so for halfway, we're
26.
still 1,300, so we're not quite to halfway, so there is 1,200 there.
Right, that's about right.
Yep.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Olive?
can I ask what the purpose, what they're gonna use this property for?
as I understand it, there's no specific plan at this point. It was just, to be candid, it's just adding to what Brad already owns, because it's currently in the trust name.
Okay.
So I'm not aware of any particular plan.
He's just been chewing up the Ballworks property little by little, it seems like. The family seems to be saying, you take a piece, I'll take a piece, you take a piece. And
Yeah, and I don't
That's
know if
kinda
this
what
is
it
part
looks
of
like
an
it's-
overall estate plan or anything like that.
I mean, the reality to Mr. Olive's question is he would be able to do whatever's allowed in that zoning.
Yeah,
If he wants to
With that
put a
property.
structure on it, he can do it.
Here's what I would, I guess, a better way of answering that. He understands that it will be R1. He understands that there are restrictions on that, and he intends to live within those restrictions. And I apologize for him not being here. He already had a commitment. He had to fly out to a basketball tournament. We could all be so lucky
Are
in
these
Las
two
Vegas.
having to do with this?
Yes.
Okay. I'm gonna just read in for the panel, the two letters that we did get.
An
My
objection.
sister Linda Spencer and I, this is from Karen Pollard. This is, my sister Linda Spencer and I inherited 4565 Pickle Road on my father Joseph Eckert's death in 2020. I would like to register an objection to the variance for these reasons. The R1 low density residential zoning was designed for large pieces of property with defined width and depth ratios. This allowed for uniformity and stabilization of values. To allow another variance of this property distorts the value in an R1 zoning. The transfer of the property to the owners of parcel 4601 Pickle will increase the likelihood of additional noise and traffic, as the previous transfer of property did in 2019. There is already endless traffic to and from the buildings on the road bordering our lot, bright lights on that building, and lots of noise at all hours. That's from Karen Pollard. The other one is from Linda Spencer. I indirectly received information of this public hearing. My sister and I inherited the property. As the owners of property zone R1 reasonably expected the residential growth of the area, as it is evidenced by the introduction of single-family homes and townhouses. These changes move the area towards being a highly regarded residential area and solidify the property values. The previous modifications to the previous parcel on 4601 brought about additional outbuildings, large equipment, traffic noise, and lights at times, and quantities not general associated with the residential area, even an R1 property. Thus, I would ask that you share my objections to the proposed split transfer during tonight's public hearing, as it is seemingly requested to support the expansion of said activities rather than residential development. That's from Linda Spencer.
And yeah, and if I may, again, I would just reiterate that Mr. Morrison plans to work within the R1 restrictions. I would also say, taking off my lawyer hat and knowing Brad personally, I've been out there on multiple occasions, and I've not been part of any kind of crazy noise or crazy lighting or anything like that. So I'm not sure what they're talking about. That's not been my experience at all with Mr. Morrison.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anything further from the panel? If not, the floor is open for a motion.
I move to accept ST 154521.
Second,
Mayor Safarian,
Yes.
Chairman Winkowski,
yes,
Mr. Olive,
Yes.
thank you. Good seeing you.
Thank you all. I appreciate it.
Good seeing you.
You too. Take
Have a
care.
good day.
See you soon.
Last one for tonight is V 62-21, vacation of the 280-0.56 feet of Jonathan Road north of Worden Road and south of the southern right-of-way line of Dustin Road in the city of Oregon, Lucas County, Ohio. Mr. Gilmore.
Well, I think I'll let Paul take care of this. It's a right-of-way issue. I believe they maintained an easement for utilities, but I'll let Paul talk about that.
Mr. Rogan?
Yeah, I know this all probably originated because the homeowner on the west side of it put up a garage, I believe, and thought it was his property because his driveway was already there. And a lot of these, this is common in a paper street where someone thought it was a part of the property because the driveway was already there. Well, it never was. And then they put up a pole barn and or a garage, whatever it is, and they realize it's not their property. So there's a choice. You either have them remove it or you look at vacating it. And it's common that we've been almost promoting the vacation of these right-of-ways if they're no longer needed. You never know 100% if they're not needed. And that way we like to retain a utility easement just in case someone needs to run something, but otherwise we're okay with vacating it. And so this is, similar to past vacations where we allow it, but we retain a certain area for utility easements, and otherwise we have no objection. I don't know if there's probably a formula that was probably created by the finance department, perhaps, that said what each would pay towards splitting it up and then split it up 50%. But yeah, we have no objection. We will have a bike path that will come by on the north side on Dustin. That'll actually start out at the Dairy Depot and cross Schmidland and then take Dustin all the way down to the Oregon Town Center. But that will not, this vacation will not affect that in any negative way. So there is just no negative impact here, but we do like to retain an easement. So that's it.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Mayor?
and I do know there was a financial formula that the finance department uses. I even know what it is. However, we kind of varied from that this time, because if you'll look, the Jonathan Road on the south side of Worden Road was vacated a couple years ago.
Gotcha.
And because of the formula and the way it takes and evaluates property, what sells over the thing, it come out 3 times the price of what we sold the property for, right directly across the street for exact same size parcels. So we just used what we did. We thought we always try to be fair.
Right.
And the finance director, we will use that formula unless something more fair exists. And that's what we did in this case.
Good. Well, I will move to pass V 62-21.
I'll second it.
There you go.
Roll?
Chairman Winkowski,
Yes.
Mr. Olive,
Yes.
Mayor Safarian.
Yes.
Seeing no further business. we
Oh, I
are
really
just-
put a conscience.
we are adjourned.
No, huh? That would have really thrown a wrench in it.
You know what? I'm sorry if I overstepped anything and I said, but in terms of the guy, RJ, I don't think he was getting it.